Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video explores an alternate version of events and characters in a reimagined storyline. This presentation is structured and adapted into an audiobook style format with narration and visuals to enhance the experience. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the story.
"I'm sorry, Tyrion," he said, breaking the silence from where he stood at the door. His brother looked away from the bed at him. His eyes were red and puffy. Jaime realized that he must have been holding it in during the scene in the hall. "What are you sorry for?" he asked. "For stopping me from killing Joffrey. I'm a Kingsguard. I'm sworn to protect the royal family." "When has that stopped you before?" He had heard many people say that kind of thing, some to his face and many to his back. But when his own brother said it, it dug at him in such a way that he hadn't felt before. But he ignored it as soon as it came. "Father's told the king to leave. We'll be gone by tomorrow." The anger returned to his eyes. "So Joffrey is leaving then?" "Tyrion, don't," he said warningly, knowing what he was thinking. "Just leave it be." "I will not leave it be, not until he pays his debt." Tytos groaned quite audibly from the bed. It got Tyrion's attention, and he turned his attention back to it. Jaime watched the two of them for a moment. He had not seen Tytos until the king paid this visit to the rock. He had been a curious, inquisitive boy who got his father's brain and was already reaching him in height. He had the sense to laugh at a good joke, and could always smile. Now it seemed like he would not live to laugh or smile again. "Are you certain that it was Joffrey who did this?" he finally asked his brother. "Yes. You can't touch him, Tyrion. He's the crown prince." His brother didn't say anything. It worried him. "Can you tell me who the Kingsguard were? It's possible I can do something about them." For once he and Ser Barristan would likely agree on something, but Tyrion only shook his head. The maidservant who discovered them only saw the white of their armor, nothing else. Tytos stilled. Jaime found himself holding his breath as he watched his nephew. His right eye blinked open, closing fast with a pained sound. Father," he whispered with a tiny little voice. "I'm here, Tytos," his father said, tightening his grip. He opened his eye again, allowing the green orb to be seen. "My eye, Joffrey." Tears began to leak out as his voice thickened. "I know, my son, I know." There were tears in his eyes. Jaime felt like an intruder now, so he left them to be alone. He walked back out the door and closed it behind him. Kevin. Location Westerlands. "Uncle, am I a bastard or a Lannister?" Tytos asked, as he rode beside him amidst a large group of Lannister men. They were traveling back to the rock from Ashmark, and were still in the mountains. They had a week's worth of riding left to the rock, but Kevin enjoyed the journey. Still, his grandnephew's question surprised him. "That is not a question you should ask, Tytos," he said in reply, turning his head to look at him. At 10 years of age, he rode and stood tall. A person only had to look at his golden hair and green eye to know that he was a Lannister. But Kevin remembered a time when his eye had a blue twin and he smiled easily. Now a black eye patch hung around his left eye, and the times he smiled were rare. "But it is a question that needs to be asked and answered," he said back. A wind blew down the path and through their short hair, while Kevin knew that his hair was short because he was losing it slowly. Tytos's was short because he had the barber cut it like that. What locks he had bristled, like tiny daggers. There was semblance of order in them as they were pushed forward, but that was it. "Why are you asking? You have a father and a family that loves you." His eyes looked out at the rest of the group to the front, where Tywin rode. No one rode beside or in front of the Lion of the Rock. Even his own family rode in the column. Genna and her family were somewhere behind him. His wife and children were close to her, and he saw Tyrion off near the edge. "But you still haven't answered the question, Uncle," Tytos told him. "Tytos, don't think of it." "I can't help but think of it." His eye looked toward the horizon and the setting sun, where his grandfather was riding to. "I feel like I must do something to prove myself a Lannister." "Don't think of it. You are only 10 years old. You have the rest of your life to prove yourself." He placed a comforting hand on the lad's shoulder. "It's not to myself that I have to prove." His one eye stayed on his grandfather. Kevin followed his gaze and instantly understood. If there had been meetings between grandfather and grandson that didn't require the entirety of the family, it was out of his sight. He was not slow as people were wont to think. He knew that the family was divided on Tytos. Some would gladly call him Hill, but the others, including Tyrion himself, Genna, and Gerion, before he had left, would gladly call him Lannister. The only one who had not said anything was Tywin. "Leave it be, Tytos," he said once more. "Let's turn to more pleasant topics. How is your training coming?" His demeanor changed into a more pleasant one. "It's coming along well. Sandor had been teaching me how to fight with and without a shield, and with many different weapons too." "That is good." It was all he could do to not say it, with a strained smile. Personally, he never approved of the Hound teaching Tytos. What that man did was simply barbaric, but it was allowed because Tytos had asked and Kevin's brother allowed it. That didn't make anything he did less barbaric. The first time Tytos trained, everyone had come to watch, only to see the Hound beat him into the ground again and again, telling him each time to get back up. But to Tytos's credit, he did just that. They continued riding for another hour or so, before the call to stop and make camp was finally given, at a little glade beside the road. Kevin brought his horse to a halt and climbed down from the saddle. He groaned as his feet touched the rocky soil, his back and legs feeling sore. He was getting old. But even though he accepted that fact, he couldn't let stop him. Tytos' question had come to him now, and he wanted to know. Fortunately, he could have it answered. He walked through the camp, idly observing how quickly it was being set up. He wasn't surprised by it. His brother demanded efficiency from those who served him. He saw that Tyrion was already sitting at a fire, a book borrowed from Ashemark in his hands. Tyrion usually sat beside him, but he must have been out attending to the Hound. When he found Tywin's tent already set up, he walked in without bothering to announce himself or asking for permission to enter. He had been his brother's faithful follower for so long, he knew he could enter without warning. He found his brother sitting at his desk, going over some papers. His eyes barely flicked upwards to see him. "Kevin," he said shortly, in greeting. "Tywin, might we speak on the matter of your grandson?" he asked. When faced with a question to his brother, he never danced around it. He owed Tywin that much consideration. "What about him?" his brother asked, still looking over the papers. A sudden roar echoed through the camp, followed by a shout of surprise and a scream. Quickly, a virtual cacophony of voices began to ring out, but the one that overrode them all was Tyrion, shouting "Tytos" in horror. Kevin only gave his brother one look before he turned and ran out of the tent, following the direction of the voices and men running towards the back of the camp. He cursed himself for not having a sword on his belt. He was getting old, but not senile. As he and the others ran, the bodies began to thicken into a crowd near the edge of the glade, and he could hear some of the voices at the front, shouting, "Kill it! Kill it! Get the Lord, and push it back!" The shouts began to die down almost as soon as they had sprung up, but that didn't make him stop. He pushed his way through the crowd to the front, and saw his grandnephew laying on the ground, his father cradling his head. His left shoulder was a mess of blood, and his right hand was clenched into a fist. The blood from his shoulder would not stop leaking out. "What happened?" Kevin demanded, looking around at the crowd. "A lion! A fucking lion!" one of the men breathed out in a voice that was equal parts shocked and awed. "It came out of nowhere, leapt down on the little lording, started clawing at him. I think he tried fighting." "You think?" "I don't know, me lord. All I saw was the lion." He gripped the axe in his hand tighter. "Someone get the fucking maester." Tyrion screamed. "You heard my nephew." "Go," he shouted. A few men in the crowd turned and ran. What was he doing out here? "Where's the Hound?" As if to answer him, the Hound pushed through the crowds when they would not part for him. He looked down at Tytos. "What the fuck happened here?" He growled loudly. "What was Tytos doing out here in the first place?" "Hound?" Kevin demanded. "Sent him to get me firewood," he answered. "What happened?" "It was a lion," another man said from where he stood, leaning on his spear. "We tried to kill it, but it took all of us to push it away from him. It fled. We would have gone after it, but the young lord." "What's in his hand?" All eyes fell onto Tytos' right hand. Tyrion reached out and opened it. Resting in his son's palm was a single bloody tooth, too long and sharp to be from any human. "7 hells," swore one of the men. "He knocked out a tooth from the lion." "He fought back," someone shouted as the maester came through the crowd and knelt down beside Tytos. With a start, Kevin recognized the man to be Tywin's personal maester. The Hound looked pleased. "Of course he fucking fought back," he said to them all. "I'm the one who taught him to do that." Captain, location River Run. Her most vivid memory of Tytos Lannister was not of how he rode beside his father into Winterfell. It was not the look of surprise on his face or how his hand reached for the sword at his belt when she had his father arrested at the inn at the crossroads. It was not his single eye watching them all as they made their way to the Eyrie, nor was the absolute rage he showed when Lysa ordered his father to the black cells. No, what she remembered most well of Tyrion Lannister's son was how he freed himself and his father from the Eyrie. It started when the imp had said he wished to confess, and so Lysa had summoned her lords to the high hall of the Arryns. While she sat on the lesser throne and Catelyn stood beside her, Tyrion Lannister, her son's would-be murderer, was escorted in. The lords of the Vale surrounded the hall. So did her own men, and he was alone. Not even his own son was there. It would go to show how disliked the imp was. "You wish to confess your crimes?" Lysa asked him. She sat alone on the throne, her son not in the hall. "Yes, my lady, I do, my lady," he replied. His hands were manacled close to one another and bound by chains. She looked at her sister smugly. "The sky cells always break them. The gods can see them there, and there is no darkness to hide in. He does not look broken to me," Catelyn said back, but she had already turned to look down at the imp again. "Say what you will." "Where to begin?" he asked. "I am a vile little man, I confess it. My crimes and sins are beyond counting. My lords and ladies, I have lain with whores, not once, but hundreds of times. I have wished my own lord father dead, and my sister, our gracious queen, as well." He cast his eyes downward at the moon door. "You want specifics, I suppose. When I was 7, I saw a servant girl bathing in the river. I stole her robe, and she was forced to return to the castle naked and in tears. If I close my eyes, I can still see her tits bouncing." Noble men and women alike gasped in horror at what he was saying, but he was not done. "When I was 10, I stuffed my uncle's boots with goat shit. When confronted with my crime, I blamed a squire. Poor boy was flogged, and I escaped justice. When I was 12, I milked my eel into a pot of turtle stew. I flogged the one-eyed snake. I skinned my sausage. I made the bald man cry into the turtle stew, which I do believe my sister ate. At least I hoped she did." The gasps of laughter were quickly becoming chuckles of laughter as he kept going. "I once brought a jackass and a honeycomb." "Silence," shouted Lysa, stopping him from continuing. "What do you imagine you are doing, dwarf?" she demanded, her face a bright pink of anger. "Why?" "Confessing my crimes, my lady," he answered, glibly. Captain spoke up then. "Lord Tyrion, you are accused of sending a hired knife to slay my son Bran in his bed, and of conspiring to murder my sister's husband, Lord Jon Arryn, the Hand of the King." "Oh, I'm very sorry. Those crimes I cannot confess, I fear. I know nothing of any murders." "You've had your little joke." Lysol spat at him. "I trust you enjoyed it. Mard, take him back to the dungeon, but this time find a smaller cell with a steeper floor," she commanded. The keeper of the sky cells, an ugly man, stepped forward. "Is this how justice is done in the Vale?" the imp shouted, making all in the hall go still. "Does honor stop at the bloody gate? You accuse me of crimes. I deny them. So you throw me into an open cell to freeze and starve and worry about the state of my son." He looked around the room. "Where is the king's justice? I am accused and demand a trial." Whispering broke out in the hall. Lysa and Catelyn both saw it. The imp had them, and they would be forced to reply. "If you are tried and found guilty, then by the king's own laws you will pay for your life," Lysa told him. "I understand the law." She smiled at him. "We keep no headsman in the Eyrie, my lord of Lannister. Life is more elegant here. Open the moon door," she commanded. 2 men off to the side reached for the wheel in the wall, pulling down on the levers. "Sister, I think this unwise," Catelyn tried telling her. But the bronze door bearing the sigil of House Arryn in the floor pulled back, revealing the forests and mountains of the Vale. The wind blew strong through the hole, making the hall echo with its shriek. "You want a trial, my lord of Lannister," Lysa told the imp. "Very well, a trial you shall." "There will be no trial," the voice of Tytos Lannister rang out from the door to the hall. Everyone turned to see him standing there with one arm holding Jon Arryn's son tight and pressing his dagger against the boy's throat with the other. The patch covering his left eye was missing so all could see the hole where nothing but darkness resided. "This farce has gone on long enough." "Mother," yowled Robert Arryn, wiggling in his captor's grip. Tytos simply pressed his dagger down on his throat, making him go still. I told you to be silent, or do you wish to look upon me again? Catelyn's nephew shook his head so quick, she was afraid it would come off. Good. My sweet Robin, screamed Lysa as Tyrion's son walked forward to his father. She looked around the hall, at all the lords and men bearing steel. Rescue your lord, she commanded. If anyone makes a move towards me, the son of Jon Arryn dies. Tytos barked out, stopping all the men who were ready to take that step. What is the meaning of this? Catelyn asked, looking down at the boy. His hand was steady and his grip was firm. I believe this would be called a renegotiation, the imp remarked calmly as he stood by his son. It is that, the younger Lancer agreed. He looked up at Catelyn and her sister. Here are our terms. My father and I will leave the Eyrie unharmed and with all of our personal items. I will keep the little lord here, he jerked around, Robert, to ensure goodwill. Once we're past the bloody gate, I will release him. Craven, shouted Alvar Royce. You are a craven, Sarah. Others took up the call and the hall began to echo with shouts of Craven. I'm no satyr. I am a son who loves his father, he said shortly, keeping his eyes up on the throne. We are leaving, my Lady Arryn. Should you feel the need to try and rescue your son before we are out past the bloody gate, he will either receive a red smile on his throat or learn how to fly. Now, give us what is ours. Catelyn saw that her sister looked equal parts terrified for her son and angry at losing the Lannisters. She chose to spoke. Have you no honor that you would threaten a child before his mother? He turned his head slightly to look at her, his green eye blazing angrily that it looked like wildfire. The woman who arrested my father on false charges, dragged the both of us to the Vale and the Eyrie, did nothing while he was sent to the Sky Cells, and allowed this mockery of a confession to go through, should not speak of honor. Lannisters pay our debts, Lady Stark. I am simply doing that. He tapped the dagger lightly against her nephew's throat. In the end, Lysa was much too afraid for her son. Something Catelyn could understand. The two Lannisters were allowed to descend from the Eyrie, and walked out past the bloody gate, with no harm coming to them. Surprisingly, Tytos proved to his word. Once they were out past the bloody gate, the boy his sister had called Sweet Robin was released, and fled screaming back into castle. That was what played through her mind as she followed her son in their walk. What was laid out before him was not good. Robert Glover had attacked Isgendil with Seta Helman Tallheart only to be caught and defeated thoroughly by Lord Randil Tarly. Seta Tallheart was dead, and the Lannister now had Delbark Glover. The Reach was now allied with the Iron Throne. I should have traded the Kingslayer for Sansa when you first urged it, Robb said to her. If I'd offered to wed to the Knight of Flowers, the Tyrells might be ours instead of Joffrey's. I should have thought of that. Your mind was on your battles, and rightly so. Even a king cannot think of everything, she told him. Battles, he muttered. I have won every battle, yet somehow I'm losing the war. He looked up to the sky. The Iron Men hold Winterfell, and Moat Cailin too. Father's dead, and Bran and Rickon, maybe Arya, and now your father too. My father has been dying for a long time. You could not have changed that. He had been there when they sent her father to his grave on the river. That had been enough for her. You have made mistakes, Robb, but what king has not? Ned would have been proud of you. Mother, there is something you must know. Is it the Kingslayer? She asked after her heart had skipped a beat. Her mind was on Brienne, and the mission she gave her. No, it's Sansa. He paused in silence, like he was trying to decide if he should tell her what he knew. We received a raven from King's Landing, addressed to me and to you. It was from Tytos Lannister. A cold feeling washed over her. The imp son, she whispered. Yes, he's written that he is now Sansa's husband, but he's written of something far worse. What? What could be worse than his father breaking what he swore in front of gods and men? Joffrey's had her beaten for every one of my victories. Tytos writes that she will be safe with him from the king, but he also writes that he has Icen will keep for her, unless I bend the knee. They beat her. They had beaten Sansa for every victory. Robb had won. Now the imp son had claimed that she would be safe. He must be lying, she told him. He must be. His father lied. Why shouldn't the son? Mother, I have seen him in the yard against the Hound at Winterfell. He was beaten and knocked down time and time again, but he got back up each time. If he says that he will protect Sansa, then perhaps the safest place for her in King's Landing would be by his side. There was a measure of respect in his voice when he spoke of the boy, something she did not think he would ever give. But why would anyone do this to her? She asked. Words were pretty on a page, but all she could remember was what he did at the Eyrie. For Winterfell, her son replied instantly. With Bran and Rickon dead, Sansa is my heir. If anything should happen to me, she could see where he was going with his words. She stopped him before he could actually say it. Nothing will happen to you. Nothing. I could not stand it. They took Ned and your sweet brothers. Sansa is married. Arya is lost. My father's dead. If anything befell you, I would go mad. Robb, you are all I have left. You are all the North has left, she told him. I'm not dead yet, mother, he sighed. For now, all we can do is trust in Tytos' word, that he will protect her. You would trust the word of a Lannister. I would trust the word of the man who defended his own father against our wolves while in Winterfell and did not demand their skins for the attempt. He kicked away Grey Wind and held down both Summer and Shaggy Dog by their throats, yet he released when asked. If Sansa has truly been treated like that by the Lannisters, I would trust him to protect her until we come and get her. Margaery. Location, King's Landing. When she was married to Joffrey's brother after his death, she would have thought that it would be an easier time to win him over. That is, until she watched Tommen's first lesson with his cousin, where Tytos Lannister beat until he was bleeding, and then some more. Loras had tried to stop it but only got a broken nose for it. That was when she realized that it would be harder than she thought. That did not mean she did not try. She often invited the king to sup with her family, so they might know one another as well as inviting him for other events. But he always refused, saying that Tytos was teaching him. She had offered to have Loras teach him in the knightly arts. But he took one look at her brother and his broken nose and started snickering. It did not help that his cousin was near and seemed amused. But her grandmother did not raise and teach someone who would give up after a few attempts. Grandmother Olenna might have left the capital, but she reminded Margaery of what she had to do. She had a plan. It came to fruition soon enough. She, her brother, and her cousins had set up a small picnic inside the Red Keep. It was positioned just so it was in the way of the king when he was done with the day's training. Her cousins sat around, talking of gallant and noble knights, songs they've heard, and of men they wish to remain. Loras stood nearby, watching everything. He wore the armor of the Kingsguard, something that she felt belonged on his shoulders. It made him look handsomer, if not for the fact that his nose was still bent. When her husband and his cousin came in, she acted surprised to see them. Your Grace, Lord Tytos, what fortune meeting you here? Come, sit with us, and share our food, she offered, swinging her arm to her family sitting around tables in the little garden. The first thing that the king did was look at his cousin. It was a brief look, but it was enough to be telling. To her. We can stay, but I cannot eat your food, my lady, he said to her. The two of them walked towards the group. The king took his seat before his cousin did. And why is that? She asked. I'm starving him, his cousin told her. He might have been a handsome person, much like the other Lancers she had seen, if it wasn't for the eye patch he wore. She knew that he must, but it still took away from him. All food made in the Red Keep has been forbidden to him. The picnic's life and festivity faded when everyone heard those words. Why? She asked, looking at him like he had gone mad. To teach him hunger and pain, he answered. He relaxed into the back of his chair, splaying his legs out. King Tommen tried to mimic him, but it did not have the same effect. His feet just dangled in the air. She knew of the pain from the first practice session, but the hunger was something she had not expected. How can you do something like that to your king? She asked, sounding quite horrified at the prospect. Easily, he replied. He's not my king, he's my student. You are cruel, Loras declared, fixing the one-eyed Lannister with a glare. You are cruel to do this to him, just as you are cruel to beat him every day. This is no knightly training. You would be right, he replied. I am not training Tommen to be a knight, I'm training him to be a warrior. He should know what it's like to be hungry. To not have food in your stomach, to have it eating away at your attention. And it's to make him some weight. He cast a look at Tommen, who still looked plump. That's barbaric. Eleanor protested loudly. Margaery's cousin looked horrified at what he was describing. She wasn't the only one. In fact, the only two who didn't look horrified were the king and his cousin. He shrugged his shoulders. Sometimes barbarism has its usefulness. The Hound taught me in the same way. He looked up at the sun for a moment before turning his attention to the king. Tommen, attend your lesson with the Maester. When it's done, come find me and tell me what you've learned. Okay, Tytos. Tommen stood up from his chair. Good day, my lady, Sarah. He walked out of the little garden before Marguerite could even give him the gift of 3 kittens. They were waiting in a basket beneath the table. When he was gone from sight, everyone turned their eyes to the Lannister, who remained behind. Megha was the first to open her mouth. Sir Tytos, I'm not a knight, he cut her off coldly before she could finish. I am, Lara said. He walked over to his chair and stood before him. What you are doing is cruel to King Tommen. I am of his Kingsguard, and I will not allow it. You shall cease this torture immediately. The Lannister ignored him, rolling his head back to look up at the sky again. Have you gone deaf? Taro, if you don't have anything to say, then don't speak at all, he finally said, rather rudely. He looked at Marguerite rather than paying attention to the expression on her brother's face. My lady, you're supposed to be the smart one. Tell me, what am I trying to teach Tommen by starving him? She looked at a mask of confused innocence on her face. My lord, you have already said what you are teaching him, crude as it may be. That's the obvious. What else am I teaching him? He asked. She held her silence, choosing to wait for the answer. He would give it to her. All she had to do was wait for him to give it. It turned out that she didn't have to wait for long. And you're the smart one, he said with a resigned sigh. She didn't get angry. She just smiled in return. I'm teaching him how to adapt and think for himself. Sandor did the same thing to me at the Rock. So I took up fishing. Fishing, repeated Eleanor. Fishing, he said again. He fell into silence. Before anyone could say anything, there was the faint sound of someone running away. What was that? Laura said, his hand going to his sword. That would be the sound of the king running away so he can try what I just gave him. Tytos remarked as he stood up from the chair. There was an amused smile on his lips, but one that was tempered by a gentleness she did not expect him to have. It helps to give them a hint every once a while. He did not tell me the answer for my sake, but for his, Marguerite realized. He knew that Tommen had hung back out of sight, that he could eavesdrop. How could you have known that he was there? She found herself asking him. His lesson with the maester isn't for another half hour, he replied, before leaving the same he came. They all watched him leave, and Marguerite had a feeling that she might have underestimated the son of the imp. Oberyn. Location. Red Keep. He had been asked to join the royal family for a private dinner because of his nephew's betrothal to Myrcella. So naturally he brought Ellaria along with him. He quite enjoyed the look on Mates Tyrell's face when they entered. One of abject horror, he always did enjoy tweaking the fat flower like so. It was his way of getting revenge for Willas, for what happened all those years ago. Both and his paramour sat and looked at the people sitting at the table in the Queen's ballroom. The Lannisters were seated on one side while the Tyrells were seated on the other. What was truly interesting to note that while the little Queen sat on King Tommen's left, it was not his mother or grandfather who sat on his right. Rather, it was his cousin, Tytos Lannister, and his new wife, Sansa. The boy's father sat next to them, and then came the king's mother and grandfather. It was rather amusing to watch them all. The Tyrells and Lancers tried to fight for control over the king, but the one-eyed lion would have none of it, having taken over his training in both the physical and mental. He had seen the first day of training along with the majority of the Tyrells and the Lancers. It had been a brutal thing to watch, but he would admit that the lesson being taught was an effective one. So was the lesson of learning how to think for oneself. It seemed that the boy king was learning that one rather well, as he seemed to look a little less plump and there was only fish on his plate. As the dinner went on, the talk around the table turned to the realm, and Oberyn watched them all talk, with a hint of amusement in his eyes. The silence from the Vale cannot go on, Lord Tywin declared. His daughter nodded in agreement. Lady Arryn and her son must come to King's Landing, and swear their loyalty to King Tommen, she said. And how exactly do you plan on having them do that, dear sister? The imp asked her, after taking a sip from his cup. The Arryns are holed up quite nicely in the Eyrie. I do not think that the Lady Lysa will come down for anything. She cannot disobey a royal command. Mace Tyrell protested. She must come down with her son and swear her loyalty. Tell me, my lord, do you have a way of getting down from there? Oberyn asked him. You must tell us what it is. The fat flower spluttered and grasped for words. It amused him. He doesn't, but I do, Tytos Lannister announced. As all eyes turned to him, he turned to the king. Tommen, have the Grand Maester write to Lord Robert Arryn. Him, not his mother, he repeated firmly. The king nodded. What should I have him write? Command him to come down to King's Landing, or I shall come back up to the eyrie and make him look at me again." It was a strange thing to say, and it earned the respective looks at him. He didn't seem to care. The only one who didn't have the look was his father, who almost snorted into his drink. If he was in lighter company, he might have started laughing. Why would that make Lord Aaron come down from the eyrie? "My lord," his wife asked him. Sansa Stark was truly a beautiful woman. Oberyn had seen Ilaria looking at her when she passed. Of course he had too. On the day of father's trial, he said that word with such disgust. I went to his room, took off my eye patch, and woke him up with a slap to the face and a dagger at his throat. Then I took him to High Hall to free father and brought him down to the Bloody Gate to ensure that we left unmolested. The way he spoke of what he did, he made it sound like it was a trivial story. Something that should be barely remembered, if at all. But Oberyn had seen what lay beneath that eye patch. The hole was surrounded by white scarring, and the scars themselves seemed to look like maggots had feasted on his flesh, while he was still alive. But since the trial and the truth revealed, he knew that it was just sloppy work on King Joffrey's part. "You did that to a boy?" Lady Leonette asked him, with a voice in shock, bordering horrified. "How could you? That was not honorable or chivalrous of you." "I know. It's a good thing I'm not a knight. I did what I had to do to get my father and myself out of the eyrie other than the moon door." He cast a look down the table at his aunt and grandfather. Everyone saw it. No one said anything. Oberyn could see the distaste the boy had for Lord Tywin and Lady Cersei. He had no doubt that if the imp had died on the eyrie, they would not have been mournful. The dinner continued with other menial talk of politics. Oberyn found himself growing bored of it. For a moment, he considered ravishing Elaria right there on the table, just to see how the others would react. The Tyrells would be shocked, and the Lannisters would probably look horrified before looking down their noses at him in disgust. It was an amusing thought, but a brief one. As the course changed, one of the keep's masters came hurrying in. There was a scroll in his hand, and he walked quickly to the young lion. "My lord, this just arrived from Castle Black for you." He took it and broke the seal. The attention stayed focused on him as he read the letter quietly. When he was done, all he said was, "Huh. What is it, Tytos?" his father asked him. "A problem for my lord grandfather," he answered, letting the scroll roll back before putting it down on the table. "It seems that my second son will not inherit Winterfell." Sansa gasped audibly. "Jon," she whispered. Oberyn had heard of the one stain on Ned Stark's honor, that of his bastard son, but while others might deride him for it, the Red Viper respected him instead. He claimed his child and brought him to his home, and raised him along with his true-born children. How could he not respect the man for that when he had done the same for his own daughters? Tywin Lannister frowned even more while the Dowager Queen looked furious, which marred her beauty. That bastard dares to steal Winterfell from its rightful heir. This must be answered with steel. It seemed that the rest of the Lannisters and the Tyrells, except for her brother and nephew, agreed with her sentiment even though they said nothing. "Actually, Aunt Cersei, you would be wrong," Tytos told her. He tapped the letter with a finger. "This is a letter from Jon, but it is written from the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, not from the Stark of Winterfell. He writes to me in being Sansa's husband." He looked over at his wife. "Your little brother has been found. He's at Castle Black, under his protection." My little brother," she repeated. Hope was naked in her voice, but one look from Cersei quashed that hope. "That can't be. Dylan, he killed them. He killed them both. One of them survived and ended up on Skaktos. Statos's man found him and brought him back to the wall. Your bastard brother sent ravens to all lords of the North, proclaiming him Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, who will stay at Castle Black until it is either safe to return to his home. He's also announced a betrothal between his brother and Stannis' daughter, Lady Shireen. It could be a lie," Mace Tyrell protested. "The boy could be lying so he can take control of the North and raise it in rebellion against King Tommen. This must be answered." The only thing the young Lannister did was look at his wife. "My lady, the Lord Commander names your brother as Rickon Stark. He has your coloring in hair and eyes, but he also says that there is a dire wolf accompanying him. He does not describe it, but names it as Shaggy Dog." The Knight of Flowers scoffed from where he stood. "Who names a pet Shaggy Dog?" he asked aloud. Derision obvious on his face. "A 3-year-old boy," Sansa said in reply. "A 3-year-old boy who got a dire wolf pup with black fur and green eyes. By the old gods, my little brother is alive. Tears appeared in her eyes, and she began to cry happily. He's alive. That may be, but he is still a threat, Lord Tywin decided. He can rise to be a challenge to the Iron Throne, and it is clear that this bastard must be taken care lest he claims Winterfell for himself, or tries to raise an army to attack the south. He is the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Kevan Lannister said to his brother. They vow to take no part in the Seven Kingdoms. He has already broken that vow by holding Rickon Stark. He must be dealt with. He looked over at the other side of the table. Lord Tyrell. Say no more, my lord, the Fat Flower said, puffing himself up with his own importance. I shall assemble a force of 2,000 men and make my way to Castle Black to arrest the traitor bastard and take the would-be Stark into custody. We thank you, my lord, Cersei said, her voice sweet. May the gods grant you the strength and the justice to stop this traitor before he has a chance to act. He puffed up even further and stood up from his chair. Oberyn rolled his eyes at the sight. Willis's father was always easily driven by his ego. Lord Tyrell, have you met Jon Snow? Tytos asked him suddenly. The man was taken by surprise because of the question and deflated a little. It's a simple question, my lord. Have you met Jon Snow? He still did not answer. So the Lannister turned to look at the table. With the exception of my father, my wife, and myself, has anyone at this table truly met Jon Snow? There was silence at the table. Not even the king or his mother spoke. Is there a point to this, young Tytos? Oberyn asked. Yes, there is. Prince Oberyn, I've met Jon Snow at Winterfell. I sparred with him to a tie. I traveled up to the wall with him when he went to join the Night's Watch alongside my father. He might not have the name, but Jon Snow is a Stark to his bones. If he has sworn the oath of the Night's Watch, he will not break it. Oath or not, he is a traitor who must face justice, Mace Tyrell declared with his usual pompousness. He just fixed the older man with a look that spoke volumes of what he thought about the man's intelligence. He picked up the scroll and handed it off to the king. Read that, Tommen, and tell me where it proclaims Jon Snow to be a traitor, he said. The boy king took the scroll. His little face was scrunched up in concentration, something Oberyn had seen on all of his daughters when they were young and reading. It doesn't, he finally said. It says that Rickon is the Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. Why is that not treasonous? His cousin asked, quick as a whip, cracking in the air. If he wanted to be treasonous, Lord Snow would have named him the King of the North. He is a traitor, Lord Tywin declared. He declares as much when he announces that his half-brother will marry the daughter of Stannis Baratheon. He has thrown his lot behind that traitor. I would say that is more along the lines of securing the future of House, his grandson countered. And if we want talk about traitors, then we are all guilty of that. With the exception of Prince Oberyn, all eyes fell onto him, eyes full of shock, outrage, fury, and 3 pairs of curiosity. Oberyn knew he had one, and could see his paramour and the boy's father were the same. How dare you say that? Loras Tyrell said, his face morphing into an angry and insulted look. Easily, he replied. We are all traitors because only the Dornish stayed loyal to the dragon, to the end of the rebellion. He turned his attention back to the meal, the king, and his wife, ignoring the looks being sent at him, even the one of respect Oberyn had on his face. Walder. Location, the twins. Lord Grandfather, Lord Lannister is at the gates, one of his byblows told him, creeping closer to his chair. His eyes were respectful, nervous, but also focused on his chair. He ignored the look like he always had with his progeny. The Riverlands were dangerous for Freys now, so he called them all back and that made the twins stuffed to full. But he still paid them not much attention. Hey, so the Lion of the Rock has finally come to grace me with his presence. Has he? He asked, as he stared at the hall full of his family. It was the midday meal and he watched over them like a proper lord should. Oh, he was well aware of all their scheming and planning. It amused him, but now this news of Tywin Lannister had come to the twins. Well, that was interesting. No, Lord Grandfather, the byblow said, looking down at the floor. It's not Lord Tywin, it's his grandson, Lord Tytos Lannister. His amusement soured at the prospect. So the old bastard's too proud to see me, and instead sends the cub, bloody Tywin Lannister. So high and mighty that his shit doesn't stink, he groused. Yet he always remembered who it was that rewarded him, after the Red Wedding. He looked at the byblow. What are you standing around here for? Go tell the men at the gate to open up and let the little lion in. Yes, Lord Grandfather. He ran away quick. He must have been one of his bastards yet, if he ran so fast. The cub walked into his hall, still armored and carrying weapons but no shield. His single eye watched him and he found it amusing. Welcome, young Lancer, to my castle. Have you come with words from your grandfather? He asked. No, I haven't, the cub replied as his men walked into the hall, just as fully armored and armed. I will have the northern prisoners transferred into my custody. I thought that you did not come with your grandfather's words. I didn't. These are mine. The Lord of the Crossing gripped the arms of his chair and frowned severely down at the little cub. You are brave to come into my home and demand something of me, little boy. Brave or perhaps foolish, he remarked. His house began to slowly rise from their seats at his tone. I am not demanding anything of you, Lord Frey. I will have the prisoners in my custody. Anger was blooming inside him. Damn the cub for his insolence and arrogance. Did he think that because he was a Lannister that he was better than him? He was just an arrogant brat who didn't know to respect his elders. And why should I allow that to happen? He did not answer right away, instead choosing to look around the room slowly, taking in everything he saw. Some of his house flinched or looked away when they saw that one eye looking at them. They would be the weak ones in his family. The gods knew he had enough of them. The cub finally looked back at him. My wife asked me for a wedding boon, he said. The anger was still blooming, but he hid it with a cackle. Here your wife, the Lady Sansa, he said. I've met her mother and brother, traitors that they were. We in the capital know of this, my lord, as does my lady wife. That is why she asked this boon of me, and we must listen to what our wives say to us. Don't we? He chuckled at his own words. His eyes traveled over to where his wife sat at his high table. Of course, if I had listened to my first wife's words, I wouldn't have this fresh one now. Tell him, my dear wife, are you happy here? She looked at him and then at the cub. I am very happy here. I am honored to be Lord Frey's wife. Of course you are, he said to her. Then he turned his one eye back to him. The prisoners, my Lord Frey, he said. Oh, very well, I will give them to you. He looked at his family and found his steward, Lothar. Go and fetch the prisoners. Yes, father, Lamb Leather said, standing up and limping away. Cousin Devon go with him, the cub said. One of the men, a brutish-looking person whose long golden locks marked him as a Lannister, stepped out from the crowd and followed his son. So you're married to Sansa Stark, eh? Or is it Sansa Lannister now? Walder Frey asked the son of the imp. You know, my son Elmar was betrothed to her sister. Elmar, where are you? He shouted into the hall. I'm here, father, the boy said, standing up from his chair. He was right next to the cub and looked up to him when he spoke. I was indeed betrothed to Arya Stark before her brother broke his oath. The cub did not say anything. Will you have some of my bread and salt, young Lancer? The Lord of the Crossing asked him. No, I won't. Unlike you, Lord Frey, I respect and honor the laws of hospitality, he said in reply. Refusing your bread and salt allows me and my men to do this. He pulled out the axe looped in his belt and lopped off Elmer's head with a single swing. As he and his house watched the head fly up into the air, the lions in the hall drew their weapons and began attacking. Walder Frey sat in his chair and watched in shock and horror as his house was slaughtered. Blood flew, and his family screamed. The lions were methodical in their work, slaying all who stood in their path. Men, women, children, it didn't matter to them. They killed everyone who was afraid. Where are the guards? He thought to himself, as the slaughter continued. Where are the men at arms? Where is the rest of my house? He remembered that they were at the other castle. Surely they must have heard the noise, and would come riding to the aid. All he would have to do was wait for them. He sat in his chair, waiting for reinforcements. But as the massacre went on, there were no men coming into the hall to attack the lions. Where are they? He looked around to see someone fighting for him, but instead he found himself staring at the cub. He was just standing there, still holding the bloody axe and staring at him. That single green eye bored into him, holding him in place. It's done, my lord, one of the knights said to the cub. The screams had stopped and blood was everywhere. Good, said the cub. Don't think you will get away from this, Walder told him. The other castle will have heard. They are coming and will put you all to the sword. Tywin Lannister's grandson or not. They won't. Not since they invited my father and half of our forces into the other castle, he said. He looked at the men around him. Tear the castle down, brick by brick. I want only the bridge to remain. No, the Lord of the Crossing silently screamed. They could not do this. Take him to the edge of the camp. I'll handle it from there. He barely remembered being taken from his chair and carried from his castle. He didn't even being jeered or laughed at as he was brought through the Lannister camp. What he did remember next, the sharp jarring pain flashing through his body, which also told him that he had a broken bone. He looked around, seeing the forest near the twins. There was a growling sound coming from in front of him. He looked and saw a giant wolf standing there. It had gray fur, gold eyes, and bared teeth. No, that's impossible, he said as he stared at the wolf. He knew it from before. You were killed. That's not Robb Stark's wolf, said the cub from behind him. According to my wife, it's her sister's. She had been following us through the Riverlands. I think that she knew what would happen. His breeches turned wet, and a rank smell filled his nose. It was the smell of his own fear. Everything was coming down around him. Why are you doing this? He asked. I helped your grandfather get rid of his enemies. I served the Iron Throne faithfully. I was rewarded. Why is your grandfather doing this to me? He isn't. I come with my own words. Then why? I already told you. My wife asked a boon of me. Walderfrey heard him leave, but couldn't look away from the wolf stalking its way to him. When it struck, he couldn't even scream. Daenerys, location King's Landing. She waited before the gate astride her silver with her blood riders, Sarah Barristan, Prince Oberyn, and her shadow at her side. Tywin Lannister and his daughter Cersei stood on the ground with their hands manacled. The former queen looked at her with absolute hatred and loathing burning in her eyes, while her father stood there quietly, revealing nothing. Across the city sat a massive army of crimson and gold. The Lannister army had come. Nervousness clutched at her belly, but she did not let show on her face. She knew that the old lion would see it and take notice. She would not allow that. This was the last army she would have to fight. And yet, she knew that this would be the hardest one. When her army had struck the city and attacked it, the boy king who they named and fought for was nowhere to be found. It was only after learning of where he went that she had heard of Tytos Lannister, the grandson of Tywin. Tell me again, Sarah Barristan, of Tytos Lannister, she commanded her Queensguard knight. I would hear his character before I meet with him. It has been a long time since I have seen him, my queen. A good 5 years, he replied. But what I remember of the lad was that he preferred to watch in silence before acting. Something that he had when I first met him as a child before. The incident that lost him an eye, he was trained by the hound, Sandor Clegane, and followed him in refusing knighthood. Clegane, the murderer of Queen Elia and Princess Rhaenys, she said, mostly to herself. Long had she thought that her nephew Prince Aegon had also been killed by the mountain, only to find that Varys had gotten him away to safety and had him raised by loyalists. They had met in Dorne, but now he was dead. He died in the siege of the city itself. Aye, the same name, but a different person, your grace. Prince Oberyn told her. That would be Gregor Clegane, the Hound's older brother. Ironically, the Hound's student was the one to finally fell him. There was an amused smile on his lips as he spoke. So he has no weakness then. His father, her shadow, Arya Stark, said quietly. He loves his father. Daenerys was surprised, still sometimes, by how she had a Stark in her company. She had come to Braavos to pledge to the Sea Lord that she was there to have peace, not war. When she left, a woman with a thin sword followed her, swearing her sword to her. It had taken 2 months, and her bear, Ser Jorah, to discover that she was the daughter of Eddard Stark. Daenerys was tempted to kill her right then and there, but stopped when she heard how she wanted vengeance for her slain family. So instead, she kept the girl close to her side and she became her shadow. Lady Stark is right, Sarah Barristan agreed. Even when Arya had told him time and time again that she wasn't a lady, he still called her that. If there was one thing that could rouse Tytos Lannister's anger, it was an insult to his father. But I still beg you to be wary, your grace. I have heard that Tytos has the mind of his father, the arm of his uncle, and the ruthlessness of his grandfather. He has had these 5 years to make them sharper. Yes, good sir, we have heard the Lion's Crossing before. Oberyn said to him, I dare say that it eclipses the reigns of Castamere. Then he didn't need to look back to know he was looking at Tywin Lannister when he said that. She had the song too and had found it to be chilling. Yet for such a brutal person, she had yet to see him in the field of battle. When she had landed in Dorne and sent ravens to all the lords proclaiming who she was and her intention, his only move back was not to send an army to stop her, as they had discovered when going through the Hand's letters, but rather to send a proclamation annulling King Tommen's marriage to Margaery Tyrell, citing there was no consummation, his youth and her previous marriages as grounds for it. "Khaleesi, riders approach," Rakero declared, his hand going to his arak. "I see 3. "I see them too. They carry the Lannister banner," Sarah Barristan said. "They are Tytos Lannister, his father and the boy king. My son has come to kill you all and take your heads." Cersei spat at them. She was ignored. The 3 riders came closer before finally stopping at distance, where they wouldn't have to shout, but was still respectful, and she got her first look at the Lancels. The imp was just as she was told about. He looked as short enough to barely reach her shoulders, and could be ugly enough to scare children. The boy carrying the banner was gangly and seemed to still be growing, but he rode his horse well, and his face was a mask of quiet determination. But his face was only a mimicry of Tytos Lannister. The one-eyed lion sat tall in his saddle. He wore no helmet, so his eye patch could be seen by all. His armor was plain and he carried no shield on his arm. There was a sword sheathed against the saddle, and she saw an axe looped through his belt. But that was not brought her attention to him. It was his presence, that silent demand that he be looked upon with respect. His one eye did not condemn her like his aunts had, but they did watch her like his grandfather. For a brief moment, she wondered if this was what Tywin Lannister looked like in his youth. He alone urged his horse forward to meet her. Stopping a third of the way, "Queen Daenerys Targaryen," he called out to her. "I am she called back, urging her silver just a few steps ahead. "You are Tytos Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, and would-be Warden of the West. I am not, as those are my father's titles." He looked back at the imp when he said those words. It caught her off guard, but she recovered quickly. "I was told that Lord Tywin had named you his heir, not your father. My grandfather has always ignored the laws when he finds that they don't suit him. My father is his heir, and I am his." This wasn't what she wanted. She had to get the conversation back to where she wanted it. "Have you come in service of the false King Tommen? No such person exists anymore. For all intents and purposes, King Tommen Baratheon is dead." "You lie. I see him right there." Cersei shrieked. She might have started running if she hadn't been warned earlier about the dragonbone bow Ago carried. Tommen, look at me." "Silence, Cersei," Tywin Lannister told her. His voice was measured and calm. It was the same it had been since he was taken prisoner. She did as she was told, but still looked at her son. "If you are asking after my cousin, Tommen, he sits there." Tytos continued like his aunt hadn't spoke, gesturing with his hand back at the banner carrier. "He is my squire." She looked at the boy. He was definitely a Lannister, but she did not know what the false king would look like. "Sarah Barristan," she called for her knight. "He has grown, your grace. But that is Tommen Baratheon," he told her. "So you lie to my face," she accused the Lannister in front of her. "I do not lie. The last act of King Tommen Baratheon before he relinquished his crown was to legitimize himself as Tommen Lannister," he replied, just as calmly as his grandfather. "The Westerlands kept such news to itself so we could be sure you come out of Dorne and strike." He looked over at her captives. "Where is my uncle, Sarana?" "The Kingslayer is being held in the black cells to await trial for his crime." Both he and his father grimaced at those words, but it was the only reaction out of them. "I see, but in spite of that, have you enjoyed your gifts?" "Gifts?" she repeated. "They're standing right there." He had said those words loud enough for his aunt and grandfather to hear. She didn't look back to see their reaction. She could guess what they were: rage and indifference. "They were in the city when I attacked it." She had felt triumphant when she took them hostage and forced them to their knees before them. "I know. I left them here when I took Taina to Casterly Rock, just after we had news that you sailed from Meereen. He left them here to be captured by me," she thought to herself, as she connected what he was saying. "He had his cousin give up his crown and his presumed name when I came forth, so he would be protected. He had the alliance between the Lion and the Rosenald, letting me take the loyalty of the Tyrells. Every good fortune that had come to her when she stepped out of Dorne was beginning to look like it was his work. But how could he have known this? When she looked out at the army behind him, she wondered why it had taken them so long to reach King's Landing. From what she had been told, Taking an army from the Rock to the capital should have taken no more than a month, but it had taken him twice as long. His army was not so massive that it was the reason. A thought came to her. What if he had been taking so long because he wanted me to consolidate my power? He was her last obstacle from taking Westeros fully. The Tyrells and the Martells had bent the knee as well as the Tullys, Greyjoys and Aarons. Although those last two were forced, Stannis Baratheon died taking Winterfell, killing Roose Bolton only to be stabbed in the back by Ramsay Snow, but not before he killed the bastard too. His daughter was married to the Starks and had no wish to press her claim to the Iron Throne, only asking that her second son inherit the Stormlands and Storm's End. Only the Westerlands and the Lannisters stood in her way, and she had their head and his favored children hostage. But what if it wasn't like that? What if the reason they were here was much simpler? So simple that not one of her advisors would think of it. She took that feeling and said aloud, "You are not here to rescue your kin, are you, my lord?" He kept his gaze on her as he shook his head. "No," he said, just as loud. "We have come to bend the knee to Daenerys Targaryen, the first of her name." Neither his father nor his cousin looked surprised by his proclamation. That meant what his words were planned. "But there are 3 conditions you must accept before I, my father and the Westerlands kneel." "You profess to bend the knee and yet demand conditions to your kneeling. Be careful, my lord. You walk a fine line right now," she warned him, her anger beginning to bloom. "I think you will find these conditions acceptable for my knee, your grace," he told her easily. "For the moment, might I go closer to your group? I would have words with Arya Stark, words I believe she needs to hear." "Very well," she agreed, turning her silver around so she could see her own group. She was not surprised to see the looks of outrage on her captives' faces. Tywin Lannister actually showed emotion, frowning and glaring at her. But there was something else in him. It took her a moment to realize that it was confusion. Tytos rode his horse up to Daenerys' shadow. "Arya Stark," he said to her, "when this is all said and done, I invite you to join me back at Casterly Rock, so you can meet your nephew." "My nephew?" she repeated, her eyes widening as she heard those words from her own lips. "Aye, my son Eddard," he told her. "He has quite the protector in your direwolf. She barely lets anyone come near him." "Numeria?" she said, questioning and hope hanging naked in her voice. He nodded once. Yes, I would like to go to the Rock." "That is good to hear. I will send a raven to Sansa to let her know that you will be coming." She smiled at that, truly happy. It was something that Mother of Dragons had never seen on her. "What are your conditions, Sarah?" Daenerys asked him, getting his attention once more. He turned his attention away from her shadow, and looked at her again. His expression was serious. Once more. "My conditions concern your captives. The first is that before you judge my uncle, you listen to what he has to say. It is something that needs to be heard." She found nothing wrong with that condition, even if she found it to be a bit odd. "Very well," she told him. He turned his gaze to her captives. "Finally. The second is that he dies, publicly," he said, pointing a finger at his own grandfather. "He dies with laughter all around him and all for him. But he dies. I'm sure the Red Viper will oblige you that task." Prince Oberyn grinned and gave him a little salute with his free hand. "I see no problem with that. Even if she found the laughter request to be just as odd as his first condition." "And what is your third condition?" He looked at his own aunt, his one eye bright with disgust at the sight of her. "You find my aunt proper employment on the Street of Silks where everyone can see her and have her if they wish." Cersei went white at his words, possibly from horror. Daenerys knew that the look on her knight's face meant he was shocked too. "My lord, your aunt is a lady of noble birth," he protested. "My aunt is a whore, Sarah Barristan," Tytos replied bluntly. "All I'm asking is that you make it official." He turned his head to look at Daenerys. "These are the conditions. Accept them, and the Westerlands will bend the knee tomorrow. Good day to you all." He turned his horse around. "Why?" Tywin said, finally breaking his silence as he stared at his grandson's back. "Why would you go against your own family?" "I told you, grandfather," he said, turning his head so they only saw the eye patch. "Family is who you choose. Since I don't consider you or Cersei to be my family, it makes it easy to get rid of you." He did not boast the words, nor was he cruel in saying them. He said them like it was a simple matter that was easily done with. His piece said, he urged his horse away from them. Daenerys watched him go, suddenly realizing that not once he had asked to see her dragons. Perhaps he had assumed that she would have them present when she accepted their bent knees. Well, if he had assumed that, then she would oblige him. She found that the conditions were acceptable, and she would take them. Scepter Barristan, Arya, she said to her knight and her shadow. Lord Tywin dies tomorrow, after I accept the Westerland's surrender. Prince Oberyn would do me the honor of delivering my justice to him when the time comes. It would be my honor, your grace, he said with a dangerous smile as they all turned to go back into the city. She rested easy that, knowing that tomorrow the Seven Kingdoms would be united under the banner of House Targaryen once more. When she was able to ensure that her power was stable, she would take Drogon and Rhaegal to the wall where their brother was and help repel what was coming. And she would do it with the armies of Westeros at her back.
Thank you for watching this video. If you find the story interesting, like, share and subscribe my channel. Now let's see you in the next video.